Hi, I'm Phileas Steyn and I'm the safari expert, and this is an updated video about the best kept secret in the Lowveld, the Manyeleti Game Reserve. Many people have never heard of the Manyeleti, and yet it lies tucked away between three of South Africa's most famous game reserves: Timbavati to the north, the Sabi Sands to the south, and the Kruger National Park to the east. In fact, the reserve's easiest access point lies right next to Kruger's open gate. When you see the boom gate in front of you, simply turn right onto the small gravel road and it'll take you straight to Manyeleti's northern entrance gate. There's hardly ever a queue here, even over the holidays, and I strongly suggest that you enter here as opposed to at the main gate further south, because the road between it and Acorn Hook is almost undrivable. Entry is cheaper than Kruger, and yes, you can definitely come in as a day visitor. I've done it 100 times before, and nearly every time I've had the whole reserve to myself. The Manyeleti Game Reserve covers 23,000 unspoiled hectares of the Lowveld's most open and scenic savanna, and it's open to the neighbouring reserves, which means you've got all the chance in the world of having incredible sightings. However, so one of the biggest challenges to any first-time visitor to Manyeleti is not getting lost. And it's not because there's no map available. You can actually pick up quite a nice map every time you come in at the gate, or at least most of the times the map will be available. And it contains most of the roads. But the problem is that there's no proper signage at all of the junctions. So next to me you'll see an old cement block, and believe it or not, these were built at every big junction of the public roads about 20 years ago, and they still contain no camp names, directions or distances. I think there were maybe one or two on the way into the main camp now that I saw actually has those on. But for the most of it, probably about 90% of them all throughout the reserve are bare like this one. And that just means you've got no idea where you are. Along the most driven roads, you'll now see multiple signs around the cement blocks as opposed to on it. And it blows my mind that they haven't simply painted on all the information years ago. So how do you know where you're allowed to drive? The best way basically to navigate the Manyeleti and to limit your chances of getting lost is to stick to the wide gravel roads and only to turn off where you see those big cement blocks. And if the road gets too narrow or it gets too bad, turn around and go to where you just came from. And as long as you don't turn off where there's a no entry road or one of the concession signs, you should be okay, and you'll eventually get back to either the main camp or to one of the two entry gates. If you've got sat-nav in your car or on your smartphone, I suggest that you keep that on as well, just to give you a rough idea of where you're driving. Another option is to install the ArcGIS Field Maps app on your phone, and then search for and download the Manyeleti Nature Reserve map. This allows you to see where you are driving even without cell phone reception, and although the map has minor mistakes, it's actually pretty accurate and very detailed. What confuses many visitors is the fact that the reserve has both public roads and private concessions. That means that you might see open game viewers with guests on the back every now and again, and they're even allowed to drive off-road. Just remember that you're not allowed to follow them into the bush, and you cannot drive on their concession roads. Even if you self-drive though, you stand a great chance of seeing the big five in the Manyeleti. Elephants are the easiest to find and seem to pop out around every corner. I love the fact that they are extremely relaxed around vehicles here, resulting in some unforgettable close encounters. Buffalo are also plentiful, and it's no surprise if you consider just how much grazing there is available in the Manyeleti. I once saw a herd of approximately 2,000 buffalo come down to drink at the main dam, and the ones at the back of the herd arrived at the water's edge nearly an hour after the first ones started drinking. All the buffalo, along with plenty of other large grazers like zebras and blue wildebeest, attract loads of lions. According to the guides at Suntswalu Safari Lodge, which post regular virtual safaris on YouTube, the reserve was home to 80 lions at some stage. If you spend enough time driving early in the mornings, you're bound to bump into lions at some stage. Leopard sightings, however, are few and far between, possibly as a result of all the lion activity. Having said that, I have had a few leopard sightings in the Manyeleti over the years, and some of them have actually been pretty good. Because of poaching, unfortunately rhino numbers have steadily declined over the last 2 decades, and subsequently they've become one of, if not the hardest of the big five to find. Having said that, they do still occur in the reserve, and just like all the other animals, they can move freely between the Manyeleti and the neighboring properties. Even on a quiet day, the reserve is still breathtakingly beautiful, with large open plains, gigantic marula trees, and its main attraction, the main dam right in the center. Providing there isn't a prolonged drought, there's always water here, and thus lots of animal activity. Hippos, impalas, and waterbuck are always around, and I've even seen sable come down to drink. Elephants love coming down to bath and quench their thirst here during the heat of the day, often in very large herds. Because of this large water source, Manyeleti is usually best for game viewing during the winter. But having said that, I absolutely love it here in November and December when it turns green after the first rains. By February-March, visibility is usually relatively poor because of the tall grass, and you've just got to hope that something pops out onto the road. Just east of the main dam lies the Jackal Plains, one of the largest open areas in the entire reserve, and a great place to look for cheetahs that come down to scent mark on the old sign block where the road turns sharply. The southern half of Manyeleti is great for wild dogs, and you're always giving yourself a chance to bump into them if you drive around here. One of my favorite spots in the south is S8 Dam. It lies at the end of an extremely scenic 2-track road that runs through stunning Knobthornveld, and in the 20-odd years that I've been visiting the park, I never once bumped into another vehicle here. Just make sure you tackle this road with a high clearance vehicle, because it does get very bad in certain areas. The map I have is actually incorrect and shows the old S8 as drivable, when in fact it's completely washed away. To reach the dam, you have to take the split to the right about halfway up the road if you're driving from the south. Or if you're coming from the north, turn right at the cement block a little bit further east of the Pod Mahogany picnic site. Speaking of which, another thing that I don't like about the Manyeleti is, unlike the Kruger National Park, there are no public picnic sites where you can get out to stretch your legs, use clean ablution facilities, maybe make some breakfast and buy something cold to drink. There are 2 picnic sites marked on the one map that I've got, and this is one of them between the S7 and S8 roads, and it's got 3 beautiful pod mahogany trees at it, and I think some time ago it certainly was a working picnic site. I remember seeing some tables and chairs here many years ago, but at the moment it's completely overgrown, it's definitely unfenced and unmanned, and even though there is a place where someone made a fire recently, I'm not convinced that that was done by anyone in the public. It was probably done from someone at the main camp itself, or maybe a special activity that they organized. But for all practical purposes, no one's going to stop here and get out here safely to stretch their legs. The other one lies at the end of a steep, rocky road that passes an old ranger station. It's called Dixie Copy, and currently it consists of a dilapidated ablution block that you wouldn't want to set foot in, and an overgrown staircase that leads up to what must have been a small kiosk and larpa back in the day. Jeez, what a pity. It's so beautiful here on top of the Copy, and I can just imagine how beautiful this must have been in its original state. I mean, the view from up here is just absolutely incredible. By now, you must be wondering about the accommodation options. If you want to overnight in the Manyeleti as a self-drive tourist, you have to stay in the main camp, which is located in the center of the reserve, and that somewhat resembles Satara Rest Camp in the Kruger National Park with its classic chalets arranged in large semicircles. They are clean and pretty well equipped with small kitchenettes, en-suite bathrooms, comfortable beds, and even air conditioners. I have to admit though, attention to detail seems to be lacking. The same can be said for other parts of the camp. The old liquor store and filling station have closed down, and although the small tuck shop next to reception is sometimes open, I recommend you bring all the groceries you need with you. You can, however, buy charcoal, wood and ice at the restaurant. It was actually closed for nearly 2 decades until it was renovated and reopened by AM Lodge late in 2021, which means you can now enjoy a scrumptious meal while overlooking the back end of the main dam. The main camp also has a campsite, but be warned, there's not much shade going around. The stands do, however, have power, sinks and braai grids, and the communal ablution block is large and clean. And if you want to escape the heat, there's a massive swimming pool with a shaded area next to it where you can relax during the middle of the day. Manyeleti's main camp might be a bit run down, but it has a wonderful wild feel to it as relaxed herds of nyalas feed between the chalets. And best of all, if you visit during the week, you'll probably be the only visitor in camp. And even then, you'll always be welcomed with open arms and massive smiles. If you're thinking of visiting, I've added the booking details in the description below. Now, if you don't want to self-drive and you want to stay somewhere a little bit more luxurious than here in the main camp, there are a few private lodges to choose from as well, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a second. Do note that I plan to visit each of these lodges in the future, and once I've made videos about them, I'll link to them above as well as in the description below. The 5-star Tintswalu Safari Lodge lies in the northwest of the reserve. The camp is beautifully designed and authentically decorated to take you back to 19th century colonial Africa. The main deck is built under a gigantic old jackalberry tree that overlooks a lush drainage line that attracts a great variety of birds and mammals. The rooms, which are connected by wooden walkways, are spaced far apart and are by far the most luxurious in the Manyeleti. Check out the Virtual Safari at Tintswalu YouTube channel to watch all their game viewing highlights each week. Just north of Tintswalu lies Honeyguy tented safari camps. They've got 2 camps, Mantubeni and Kokomoya, both of which consist of 15 large and extremely comfortable safari tents. Both camps have electricity, Wi-Fi and swimming pools, and they serve the most mouth-watering food imaginable. Pungwe Safari Camp in the far south of the reserve offers a much more rustic safari experience. This little unfenced camp only has 4 basic but comfortable safari tents with no electricity. Paraffin lamps provide light at night and fires are lit whenever you want a hot shower. There's no Wi-Fi in camp, but you can charge your camera batteries under the communal lapa where meals are generally served. If you enjoy bushwalks, Pungwe is definitely the place to visit. Last but by no means least is the 2 wildlife up-close camps, Buffelshoek and Nzaka. Buffelshoek lies in the scenic and open southeastern section of the reserve, while Nzaka lies in the dense thickets near main camp in the center of Manyeleti. These 2 rustic camps are both unfenced and electricity free, and each has 5 basic but comfortable safari tents. If you ask me, they have the wildest feel of all. Manyeleti really is a very special place, and it's hard to believe that it still has so few self-drive visitors. I think the lack of those facilities I mentioned earlier, like picnic sites and proper road signage or a camp shop, really makes all the difference, especially considering that Kruger is right next door. So why don't they just sort things out? Well, that's quite a tough question to answer. Things have actually looked like this ever since I first came here in 1998, and despite its massive potential, Manyeleti's development seems to be hampered by reserve politics. You see, as far as I understand, it's owned by the neighboring community, but the Mpumalanga Tourism and Parks Agency manages it on their behalf. On top of that, there are individuals that own private concessions throughout the reserve, and one can only imagine that they don't really want to share the roads with the self-drivers. So as a result, Manyeleti doesn't have a single clear vision, but instead it gets pulled into different directions, preventing it from reaching its full potential. So here's my verdict on this hidden gem of the Lowveld. Are there certain things that I dislike? Of course there are. But my love for this incredible beauty and this wonderful wilderness feel far outweighs the negatives. I mean, where else can you drive in your own car in what essentially feels like the Sabi Sands? I'll definitely be back many, many more times, sometimes in my own Toyota Prado, and hopefully also as a guest to some of those wonderful lodges that I mentioned earlier. And my hope is that you too will support the tourism here in Manyeleti by visiting soon. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to ask me any questions you might have about the Manyeleti in the comments below.